We have I love when Dave does the readings, and Dave Pedworth will be giving our reading today. Dave, are you there?
I am here.
Would you please go ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I won't get them, but I want extra points for the timeliness of my meeting.
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, at 2:02 a.m. tomorrow morning is the actual winter solstice, and my reading today is a poem entitled "The Shortest Day," which is today. So the shortest day came, and the year died, and everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world came people singing, dancing to drive the dark away. They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through all the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. All the long echoes sing the same delight this shortest day, as promise wakens in the sleeping land. They carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends and hope for peace. So we do here, now, this year, and every year. Welcome, Yule. That's by Susan Cooper, and if you're looking for a last-minute gift for a child, it's available in a book titled The Shortest Day with wonderful illustrations. Thank you. May you have peace and contentment this season and the year to come.
Dave, thanks so much. That was just beautiful and well read. What was the name of the book again?
The Shortest Day by Susan Cooper.
Susan Cooper.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dave. Your readings are always so appreciated. Very, very appreciated. Thank you. In a few moments, we'll be viewing about a 20-minute TED Talk entitled How Great Leaders Inspire Action by...
How do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, how do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition. And yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery, and this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. Sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right, because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the dot-com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers' team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich, and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. And no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, that's an amazing discovery, guys. Now we'll improve upon your technology. But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? Something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on the scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Geoffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat-screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed, and it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, that was very interesting. Thank you, Program Committee, for finding that. Lots to think about.
Okay, I'll present the dissent here. First of all, if you look at what he's talking about belief and not rational thinking, and he's talking about limbic brain, etc. This is not stuff that humanists really feel very much about. Really much is supposed to be important. We're supposed to be rational. And if you see what the subject of his talk is, it's how to sell. It's all on selling. I say we got enough selling. He gives the example of Apple, which about the time that this talk was given, what was Apple's greatest success? They garnered 90% of all profits from the worldwide cell phone market. 90%. They took over the whole business, 90% of the profits. What percentage of the sales did they have? 10%. Now, this is quite an achievement to get 90% of profits from 10% of the sales. But for 90% of the people who were buying phones, they weren't doing a damn thing. So they weren't really providing a broad service. They had sold themselves as the preferred product for the rich snobs to buy at a higher price than anybody else was selling phones. And they made a lot of money. And they got started with a loan from the Small Business Administration. And so they were on government money, and then they hid the biggest pile of money in the world in Ireland, so that was untaxed in the United States. So much money over there that they got a tax break to bring it back to the United States tax-free. I mean, it's just insane what they did. But let's go to the Wright brothers. You know, the Wright brothers achieved powered flight first. Sinek says that. Well, when did they win? When did they win that battle? They may have won it in 1903, but after 1903, when they did the first powered flight, they kind of disappeared for a while. And did they change the world? Well, 1914, there was a world war fought by airplanes. Not a single Wright airplane participated in World War I as a battle plane at all. They didn't make any of the planes. By 1920, they'd sold out or merged with Glenn Curtiss, who figured out how to make planes that ordinary people could actually fly, and not just the Wright brothers, who relied on this thing called wing warping that was just based on extraordinary talent at flying for them, but it was not a consumer technology. But the biggest thing they had was that in the 1940s, when they donated their airplane to the Smithsonian, what's now the National Air and Space Museum, they got they put a contingency on it. We can take the plane back if you ever suggest that anybody else ever invented powered flight. So they controlled things just the same way that Steve Jobs and Apple was a control freak, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about controlling markets and making a lot of money.
Mike Boucher, you had a comment.
Yeah, it occurred to me, Donald Trump also tapped into what people believe and what they want, whether he believes it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be used for good or evil.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I think I guess, humanistically speaking, there's got to be another element in there to have humanity progress forward, not just, having somebody being able to profit from it.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I know how to say right now.
And in fact, Joyce came up with an example of that. If we want to show it, I'll leave it up to.
This is one of the latest ads put out by the Trump campaign for his reelection.
Seattle's pledged to defund its police department by 50%, even including a proposal to remove 911 dispatchers from police control.
Joe Biden said he's absolutely on board with defunding the police. Listen closely.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, you've reached 911. I'm sorry that there is no one here to answer your emergency call, but leave a message and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Crime will rise significantly.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Peter Emerson.
Yeah, that whole thing about defunding the police, it was a word that came from a group of people that had been angry for and misused and whose ancestors were kidnapped, they didn't check with anybody about that word. It was just their thoughts. And it's a real example of how that word defund the police was used against the Democratic Party. Mike, did you have, after viewing that, did you have any other comment?
Not really, no. But yeah, that was definitely a powerful commercial there. But since I know about video editing, I don't know all the nuts and bolts of it, but I do know where things can be taken out of context.
Sure.
And used to sell an agenda.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, and one thought about that was that it's appealing to the limbic brain.
Right.
There's the emotional impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I did like the idea of knowing why you're doing something. I'm a member of an education group called Columbia Wound Care Community. That is a group of medical professionals who get together to share each other's knowledge and to share between medical systems. That's how it started. And the why of our group is there's a lot of folks that are doing wound care that don't have up-to-date, it's our belief, that don't have really up-to-date now. And so, but so often what we do is tell people what our program is rather than really why we're doing what we're doing. And that it gave me a lot of thought that maybe we should be a little bit more concrete in the why we're doing what we're doing. Pete had a comment here. I'm uninspired by, this is Pete Barquette. I'm uninspired by this. You can look back at success and failure reasonably accurately, but I didn't hear any predictive claims which would give me more credibility about this issue. Joyce had a comment. See some Jonathan, is that hate? H-A-I-D-T here, liberals versus conservative thought. Why Trump inspired so many to drink the Kool-Aid, as Carl Levin often says. Kay had a comment, question. So hopefully, Kay, you might come in. How could we apply this to Trump's success?
Well, I think that's something we all ponder.
Yeah.
How could this criminal be a success?
Yeah.
How has he shown people that what he believes in is worthy and get them all to vote for him? I don't have any answers. I think there's a kind of innocence among people who believe in him. They think that, there was an article in the paper about the manufacturing of refrigerators or something, that people were so grateful to Trump for doing that, but he was doing that as sort of a PR stunt, and yet they're believing he did it for them. Anyway, he's a puzzle to me. I'd be interested in anyone else's thoughts.
Well, actually, when I would watch Biden get up there versus Trump and put my own preferences off to the side as much as I could and just watch their dynamics with the audience, I would often be frustrated with Biden getting up there very quietly saying, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. And he would also focus on all of these things. Okay, Trump's screwing this up, Trump's screwing that up. We're going to try to make this better. We're going to try to get ourselves back to some semblance of normalcy, etc. And Trump, of course, his whole campaign was make America great again. That's that why kind of thing that this guy is talking about.
Yeah.
And he'd get up there and he'd appeal completely to the limbic system, and which the limbic system would almost be suppressed whenever Biden got up there. I was saying, Biden, you've got to put some more excitement into this, or get people involved somehow instead of just getting up and reciting this and that and the other thing.
But that's interesting. The quietness of Biden, it was what appealed to me.
Right.
So my limbic system responds to that rather than bombast.
I do think that many of us were so overwhelmed by Trump's whatever that the quietness of Biden might have been.
Yeah.
I'll put you in.
Renge, you have you're next. Renga, you're next.
Yeah, the talk was rather disappointing to me. I thought it would be about really leadership. Now, I can think of two categories of leadership. One is from those with authority, say politicians or officials or corporate heads and so on. The other could be from the masses. It can be at the world or national level or even at a local level. Now, the first one with authority, of course, they can do good, but more often they can do more harm if, by their leadership. And same thing is true in terms of officials or corporates. So the interesting thing is, how do we make sure that, the leadership comes from the masses, from the, general, though not without authority. But there also, it's quite possible that they can do harms, like you have religious groups mobilize against, doing something harm or racism, and various other things can be there. So how does this play out in terms of, how to encourage the leadership in the masses, which will do good to the society and not create harm? At the same time, how to make those in authority to go more towards the path of doing good and less towards doing harm. Of course, you can never prevent them doing harm.
Right. Thank you, Renga. Chaz, you're next.
Okay, so well, first of all, I am going to try that. I'm going to really think about my company and try to apply that. I don't know if it's if it's a gimmick or not, but I'm going to try it. But the other thing I wanted to mention was, we were going over the facts of the Wright brothers and so forth. Well, I saw something, a correction on the idea of the Wright brothers. They had a sister who was highly educated, both in engineering and business and a lot of things. And it came up in this special where they talked about her, and you don't hear about her, but if it weren't for her, the Wright brothers would not have been successful.
Interesting.
She was the brains behind the whole thing.
Dave Beam, he had a comment. Apple is a leader. The issue of was it a good or bad leader is a different discussion. Yes. Oh, sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave. I didn't know you wanted. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just the only comment though is I think the video is quite right on. I mean, we all live in this illusion that we're much more evolved than we really are. I think the vast majority do function under the limbic system. Yes, we as humanists believe that ideally, in an ideal world, we all act rationally, but that's not the way the world is. I don't think at all. I think the vast majority of people work on the limbic system. And if you're trying to sell something, that's the way to go. I worked with a lot of businesses when I was in my professional life, and it was always the phraseology was sell the sizzle, not the steak, get into that limbic system. So yes, I think it was quite right on.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Al, you're next in line.
Yeah, that's still about Trump. Trump is like Apple. Apple sold computers for people who don't understand computers. And if you go back before, what was very successful, well, from the 1950s through the 70s and 80s, IBM was very successful, but they sold computers, but they sold to the chief executives. They didn't want to sell to. They didn't want to sell to the rank and file. They sold to the big executives. They ran classes for executives who didn't understand computers, and in that they sold themselves as the, as the people who could sell to the people who didn't understand computers, and they did pretty well with that too. And Trump is basically, government and policy for people who don't understand government and policy. That's if you want to make a lot of money, you sell to the people who don't understand because they don't know what they're paying for, and it's a lot of bugs. But you got to get this belief thing. I mean, the point about belief is that belief definitely has a role in, King got people to go with the belief thing, and Trump got people to go with the belief thing. Most things that succeed manage to present an image of being socially acceptable and palatable, even though they may or may not be. It's a very important thing to get people to think that they're aligned with you, and even though they may or may not be. It's so hard to say. Is Warren Buffett aligned with us or with them? Well, sometimes he goes both ways, right? He finds a way to do that.
Thank you, Al. Joyce, you had a comment about wanted to make an addition to your earlier comment.
Yes, the reason I brought up Jonathan Haidt is that it struck me that the limbic brain is more, I don't know if you'd say more easily manipulated, but he makes the point that conservatives believe more or are influenced more by such things as sanctity, purity, tradition, authority, which are emotional kinds of, in other words, the sanctity of the human life, the abortion issue, the flag, and we must not trample on the flag, and these are emotional issues. And for liberals and progressives, by most part, we like to put that aside, get the feeling aside. We are rational people. So even the slogan, what Trump had found was the ability to use fear to point out that the other side is challenging the sanctity and the purity. And when even that slogan, "Make America Great Again," says America is bad, America is suffering, America is being put down. So it still operates out of fear, but it still appeals to that limbic need, and we try to deny that.
Right, agreed.
As far as Biden isn't so exciting. We had a president a few years back that was not exciting, but I think was every bit as effective as Donald Trump is, and he did it with charm. You know who I'm talking about. He could charm a rat out of his hole, Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
I think he was every bit as effective as Trump without the excitement.
Okay. Thank you. Willie, you have a comment. How could humanists use this sales technique? Got any thoughts on that, Willie?
When people ask me about how I believe in God or not, and why and everything, I have always used a logic-driven argument, kind of like, does anybody ever watch the Atheist Experience on TV? It's where people call in and they argue whether there's a God or not. And the guy, Matt, the guy there that runs the show, always talks about fallacies and all sorts of logic stuff that I think doesn't really get to people. And that's always what I'd been using. And I'm trying to think, is there somehow I could use this model when I try to explain to people why I don't believe in God, hoping that maybe they'll figure the same thing out. Okay. What could I do to use that limbic brain, or whatever you call it, the emotional part, to say why I don't believe in God?
I think that's a perfect example, by the way, of why these stupid ideas of Christians prevail.
It's so emotional.
It is. Yeah.
One thing I've used, and when I explain that I am not a believer, is that my experiences in the company of believers when they behave in ways that are crass and cruel, that it more or less got me to thinking about what's right and wrong rather than hold on to a belief that I was programmed to believe as a young child.
Well, that's what they use that a lot in the atheist experience, like God said how to treat your slaves and that sort of thing, saying how horrible God is. But people who believe in God, they're like, they can't see.
Too true. Yeah.
All they see is God is good. So what is it? Can anybody think of anything that we could use as advertisement even? You know, we say good without God. Is there anything else that we can say that would appeal to people's?
Why?
I do have some comments, but I'll wait till my turn.
Okay. All right, Dave. Okay. And Dave, you're it next. So go ahead, Dave Ritchie.
So two comments related to that. One is for the talent show. For the last like 2 or 3 years, I've been trying to work up a song about humanism for the talent show, and I've never finished it. And it kind of is focused on that kind of intent of getting the feeling about what's so great about humanism. And the main line in it is, we shoo the woo to get to the wow. And the idea that, that religion is, they need this all-powerful God who can just do anything at a whim, and that's how we get all this wonderful stuff. And here we think we can get all this wonderful stuff even without all that magic stuff. That's pretty amazing. So that's kind of the basis of this song, and so I'm kind of working on that.
Oh, finish it.
Stuff. And it may have to come out to be more of a poem than a song because I haven't got the melody for it yet, but we'll see how that turns out. But the second part is when we were working on the mission statement for HGP, we found that that was a very similar process to what we were going through. That is, you know, the first attempts were very much of, well, we're here to provide a Sunday meeting that can bring people in, and maybe especially, you know, retired people or something and whatever. And we kept trying to work it back. And actually, Bernie Daler helped quite a fair amount, kind of getting us to the real gist of what it is we do. And our current mission statement, which Bernie helped to come up with significantly, is to create a thriving local community that promotes and acts upon the ideals of humanism. We've decided not to try to sell humanism in this, but we did try to say why our group exists. That is what we're trying to accomplish, and forget about how we're trying to accomplish it or exactly what steps or whatever else. But why we're here is to help create this thriving local community that does these things. So I kind of found this talk, and to be honest, I wasn't super impressed with the talk as a whole, but I do think he brought up a number of great points that we can discuss like this.
Yeah.
Anytime that you get into a position of creating a mission statement or a central focus for a company or an organization, I do think he's right that it helps to get right to that why question and branch out from there.
Thank you, David. Kay says, I read that Jobs was an Ayn Rand follower. That gives me pause about his idealism. Kay, any other comment on that?
Oh, not really. I think he was a part of a trend in the 80s, 90s, where winning was the only reason to exist, was to win. And that has always been my impression of Jobs anyway. So when I read that, it just gives me pause.
Yes, thank you.
That all of the we must win, we must make the most money, we must overpower every other country. This whole notion is sort of repulsive.
Okay, thank you. Pete Barquette has the next comment.
Okay, I got a couple of things. Rosemary Clooney years ago in an interview said, yes, I have some talent and, have a good product, but mainly I'm thankful that two guys from Fresno wrote Come On to My House. And it resonated with me with in the entertainment industry, but I think it's true in every industry. Paul and I went to all kinds of college auditions and things with other groups. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of other acts with great talent and great beliefs, wonderful people, and a lot of it is just luck.
Dumb luck.
And Biden is a perfect example. He's run for president for 12, 14 years, whatever.
Oh,
this time,
30 years.
This time, his message fit. The other times, it didn't. It had nothing to do with him saying how he said his message. A couple other thoughts about this guy. He really reminded me of a preacher or a timeshare salesman, repeating the same mantra over and over again. I was just not moved at all.
Thank you, Pete. Chaz, you're next.
Two things. First, I love the mission statements or whatever of how the humanists describe themselves.
Yeah, it's a good.
It's just beautiful. Mm-hmm. The other thing is about God. When somebody says, do you believe in God? Are you an atheist and so forth? It's such a meaningless statement. Yeah, I believe in God. Yeah, it's a rock. It's a particle. I don't know. But what I know is that God does not have ears. Why would he have ears? Because they look cool? Well, they look kind of silly, really. God does not have ears. And then go on to, does he have a nose? Well, of course not. He doesn't have to breathe air. What, he had a nose and then he thought of a reason why we should have a nose too? He thought it looked cool. So I'm going to create man and I'm going to give him a nose like I have because I have it because it looks cool, but I'm going to have a reason for it because they need to breathe in air. So, you can go on and on and on with lips, with teeth, with hair, with genitals, with everything. God does not, it makes no sense for God to look like us. And I don't like to argue about God.
No.
Because it's not whether, you can define it any way you want, but clearly God does not have a beard. He does not have sex, and so forth. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Anyway, what Robert Sanford was very instrumental, and I think he wrote the HGP mission statement and was part of that. So thank you, Robert. If you can get in, let us know. Gretchen has a comment. I remember hearing someone say, which way are the people going? I'm the leader. I have to get in front of them. Gretchen, you have a thought on that? Unmute.
Yes, I think a lot of times that this is the skill of leadership. You find out where the great unspoken massive voices are, and then you give them voice. And we see that with Trump, and we certainly saw that with Martin Luther King. And that's where the eloquence helps, and that a lot of times narcissistic personality that loves to be the center of attention demands it, craves it, and can put forth their fantasy of magical thinking.
Magical thinking.
will emotionally appeal to people. They're great manipulators, and a lot of times that you can't get a much more of a narcissistic personality than Donald Trump. And when you were citing Bill Clinton, he was a milder form of the same thing. So I think it's the combination of that ability to locate what it is that enough people want, and then having the willingness to get out in front and wave the flag for them.
The economy's stupid.
Yeah, it's the economy stupid, right?
No, and the argument about trying to say, well, God doesn't have a nose. Then we're into thinking again. So that's too much. That's out of the limbic system. That's appealing more to the mind. Anyway, and then I had a second comment. I don't know if you want to give somebody else some space or not.
Go ahead. Go ahead. We're okay.
Okay. Well, regarding Jonathan Haidt, I believe when they did the research, they came up with 5 things that generally people tend to value, and they were loyalty and authority and purity, and also fairness and caring. And the thing is, between the liberals and the conservatives, as I remember, the conservatives tended to value the first 3: authority, loyalty, and purity, whereas liberals highly stress fairness and taking care of people. So it's a matter of stress within these 5 shared values. And so rationality, as I recall, doesn't appear. I mean, the dedication and belief in justice and taking care of people, those are emotional things. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Can you see me?
Yep. What do you got on your head?
It's one of my hats. It says, "I am their leader. Which way did they go?"
I love it. Oh, that's great.
That's all I wanted to share.
Oh, gosh, it's wonderful. We needed a laugh. Albert, you're next.
Okay. I guess we were talking about beliefs and humanism. How do we get this energy of belief into humanism? Every movement, I believe, has some point where it has to say, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. The curtain generally nowadays is words, that you have to find words that people will accept and identify with, and not try to figure out too hard about what they mean. And I think in humanism, we kind of touch on that, where we have this idea that people can live lives of meaning and purpose, that we don't really go too far into trying to disentangle what is a life of meaning and purpose, and where does meaning and purpose come from, and that we kind of say that people will work that out for themselves, that we don't want to pull that apart. But those are kind of the magic words behind what humanism is, that you got to try to get people to buy off on those ideas that meaning and purpose can be self-generated, and that people basically have within themselves the necessary energy and creative force to create the meaning and purpose. I think that's the way it's going to go with for humanism to gain any traction at all.
Okay, thank you, Albert. Let's see, Joyce, you have a comment here. When Dell and I were, this is from Joyce, when Dell and I were considering whether to show this talk, I was not focused on the commercial application. Let's see, what do I know about business anyway? But I did find Sinek's circles interesting in relationship to leadership. That is what people are picking up on for the most part. Joyce, any additional comment on that?
Oh, no, I was just going to add that Gretchen is right about the focus of it all. In a sense, all of Haidt's categories have to do with not necessarily with rationality, but Haidt does go on to point out that liberals and progressives fall more into the fairness and caring aspect, whereas conservatives look at the purity and the sanctity and the authority. And I think we consider ourselves on the fairness side, but you take some thinking to get it done.
That's right. And then Robert's comment here is that just wanted to share that Robert wrote the mission statement. So that was a good thank you. It was actually quite elegant, Robert. And Pete Barquette.
Oh, I'm back already.
You're back already.
On the appealing to emotion thing, have you seen that Freedom from Religion Foundation done by Ron Reagan?
No.
His closing line is, "I'm not afraid of burning in hell." So they touch on the fear thing. But I also wanted to point out, I think overall logic eventually and science gradually wins out.
Yes.
We have so many more people now who are non-religious and so many more people who do believe in the science over the centuries. I just think it takes a while maybe for it to work its way into our limbic part, or maybe it takes a while for us to overcome
early learning.
You could put me
okay. Okay, thank you, Pete. Dave DiNucci, you're next.
Two things. One was the Jonathan Haidt thing. One point I seem to remember is, as far as the purity measure, he actually said that both conservatives and liberals focus on purity, but in different ways. You notice that, for example, regarding food consumption and things like that, the tendency to go organic and GMO free and all that kind of stuff is often more on the liberal side. It's like we're gonna be more pure in the kind of things that we consume and whatever, but it's kind of a different kind of purity. And the second comment I wanted to make, that this mission statement has come up a number of times. I just wanted to mention that, first of all, it was a group effort. It was a great group effort. Robert was in there, Bernie was in there, Joanne was in there, all kinds of people were in there. And I think we did a great job. I once wrote up the exact process that we used, coming from all kinds of different directions to come up with the mission statement. And by the end, I mean, some people are still very critical of our mission statement, but I personally happen to like it a lot and think it's very focused. And the reason I mentioned Bernie is he was one of the first people to get it down to the form that it's in right now. But I don't want to downplay anybody else's involvement. It was very important and useful. Yeah, I think that's mostly what I wanted to say.
Okay. David Beam, you're next.
Yeah, just a comment about, the question of how do we sell the humanist group and stuff. I think we've talked about, we believe in rationality and that sort of thing, as opposed to the supernatural and that type of thing. But I think another really strong cornerstone of the group is, as opposed to the conservatives' views of, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, the individualist, blah, blah, blah. We believe that humans do much better when they work together. I think our civilization has proved that out quite well. I mean, their advances always come from cooperation and that type of thing. We all have our talents, and bringing those talents together. Sum is greater than the sum of its parts, kind of thing. That sort of thing. So the pro-social nature of our group, that we believe in cooperation and working together, that we move together better society, I think is a really important point, as opposed to, again, the conservatives' more individualistic look. So
thank you, Dave.
That's all.
I've got a comment. I put myself in line here, but I've got a comment. As far as, as a child, I was raised in went 8 years to a Catholic school. And I remember being educated on the 10 Commandments, and I found them I remember being a little kid thinking, all right, honor your father and mother, but there's no take care of your kids. There's no commandment to take care of your children. I remember thinking that, like, there's something missing. I remember that story where Abraham takes his son up to be sacrificed. And I mean, as a child, I'm thinking, this guy was nuts. He was going to murder his own son, who he dearly loved. And and I remember the nun saying thing, but he didn't. God interacted and made sure he didn't have to do that. But it didn't work for me. But there was so much community in the Catholic Church, friends that I'm still close with, that I went to school since first grade, community. And with the American Humanist Associations coming, I wish they hadn't done this, the 10 commitments. It's like a gimmick, and I find that a bit offensive, the 10 commitments. I wish they'd gotten away from that and made it 12 behaviors of the humanists or whatever. But those commitments really answered the child that's still within me, that was looking for 10 commandments that I could follow. Teaching a little girl before you do sex education about adultery, I mean, that was flipping nuts, and had nothing to do with me as a commitment, as a behavior. But yet here they're teaching, thou shalt not commit adultery. Okay, what's that? And they were also, before they'd even explained what sex was to me, I didn't know what it was. And but anyway, I really feel that the humanist idea that there are behaviors that go beyond the belief of humanism, but there's behaviors, and I find them really satisfying. Those 10 behaviors that was introduced at a meeting a few months ago. And I think that is working towards movement towards an emotion, and that parents that are looking for guidance as they have left a church, but they're still looking for guidance. I really think what the American Humanists Association has done with these behaviors is it deals with the limbic system, that I think will be beneficial. Yeah. Al, yeah, go ahead.
I think you tapped into some of the sentiments that all of us ex-Catholics have gone through.
Do you remember that, Pete?
I do.
Why are they teaching me what this is a wonderful thing, what Abraham did? I think that is horrid.
Oh, Pete has a song about that. Do you
Oh,
remember?
yeah.
He has a song about Abraham and that choice.
I would let
Yeah, and in doing research for that song, I looked to try and find some logic, the three greatest religions in the world, and the only positive thing I found was that some people believed at that time child slavery was very common and child sacrifice.
Yeah.
And they said that this was the first episode of against child sacrifice. It was a way of starting to think about getting rid of child sacrifice. Other than that, I never have found any redemptive qualities to that story.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. So I think we all carry, those that were brought up in faith, carry some of those things that help, emotionally say, I want to turn into something different. Thank you. Robert had a comment here.
No,
I'm sorry, honey. You're next. I forgot. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to tell to Pete, he talked about progress being slow. And I saw, I guess, a news story or something this morning that said that during our lifetimes, Pete, you were born about the same year I was, during our lifetimes, acceptance of interracial marriage has gone from 11% to over 90%, which that to me was like the best news I've ever heard, even though it's a 70-year trend. When I adopted my daughter 30 some years ago, I was hoping that by the time she was old enough to adopt somebody, acceptance of Black people adopting white babies would be widespread. But that's I'm figuring that at the current rate, we'll get to that by the year 2200. So we got a ways to
We got a
wait.
way to go.
But you know, it could still happen. It could still happen. We're going the right way. And I had one other thing I was going to say, but I forgot what it was.
That's okay. Tell me later. Robert, and let's see, we're getting close, but Robert had oh, this is good. This will be our last comment because it's the last one. I agree. Robert Sanford says, I agree with what Pete just shared, but there's a generation gap or two between reason and science appearing, and when it generally is adapted. For the mouth breathers, evolution and climate change are both remain false beliefs. And Gretchen has the moral of the Isaac and Abraham story is God über Elliot. Okay, say it, hon.
God über alles.
God über alles.
Yes,
God over all. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Well, this was wonderful. I think we got a really good discussion going. Thank you so much. And I think our time is up, but we can continue on afterthoughts after we have some closing right now.